Hey, welcome back. This is Tim Ellis, and this is my second installment in my art history lesson, where I am presenting my kind of avant-garde, very reductionist, very overly simplified art history and explanation of why modernism happened, why art went so crazy at modernism, and then into postmodernism and whatever you'd like to call our current era, which is technically postmodernism, but I think future art historians are going to refer to this current era of the 2025 era, where we see AI art coming in and affecting us with new technology, pushing us further as something new. So that'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds. So let's look at what we were looking at last time and just do a really quick review. And basically the bottom line to the entire philosophy of what I'm teaching here is that the camera changed the role of art. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to click through some of these, but this is art before the camera. And I did not show too many examples, but I'm showing lots and lots of art kind of before the invention of the camera. And then at the printing press with the Renaissance, where art did change a little bit, but not a ton, where information was traded more freely because of the written word and more people becoming literate. But I think a lot of people looked at this time period as art changing dramatically. And as I argued with the Three Graces by Raphael, and then also the one in the prior slide in Pompeii, we don't really see a huge change in that art. Okay, so Renaissance officially starting in 1490 till about 1700, and my argument is that we really don't see too much of a change here. Let me just click over to my main camera here, and I'm going to pull out my Jansen's History of Art and just literally page through it to kind of make this point. Okay, I buried it here. Here it is. Okay, so this is a lot of professors. When I was at Alfred University, this was our textbook. It was a different version because it was older. But if you're paging through, you're kind of seeing Egyptian and then Greco-Roman and things like that. You're seeing a lot of functional art that's buildings, art that is statuary, art that are with friezes and things like that. And sorry for the terrible graphics here. Hey, that's the Nero image that I used in the right on the other side over here, where we were talking about heads of state and literally letting people know what other people looked like. Now I'm going to page way ahead. We see friezes teaching religious things. I'll just try to get you on camera here. This is like the worst ever. I should have laid this flat. But I just wanted to show you not a lot of change, not a lot of change. Let's go way ahead here. Let's see, where are we now? We are at 1490. So we are in the beginning of the Renaissance, and we're really still not seeing a ton of change. And remember, I showed you that the Three Graces at the time of the first century already looked like a lot of that Raphael stuff. Hey, here's Bosch. Remember we talked about how Bosch is kind of an anomaly because his stuff is so out there. Goya is another anomaly, who when I was paging through here, I'm going to go to him in just a second here. Still not a lot of change. And then let's go, okay, kind of our quintessential Renaissance art here. Still not looking very different from our Greco-Roman stuff. Still not very different. We're not seeing any abstraction. We're not seeing any artists really putting their own spin on things. Now this is another anomaly I'll throw in there. Francisco Goya. And Goya did incorporate art that had a lot to do with really the psychology of the human, what's going on inside. Like, look at this wild figure he's drawing at a time when people weren't really doing things like that. And this is before the camera, by the way. That's 1818. So this, once again, is an outlier. But I found two examples of art outside of the invention of the camera that really shows a lot of expression. And I'm sure some of you who really know art history better than me might be going, all right, Ellis, there's more. But I'm not seeing a ton of examples. So as we start to flick ahead, now we are getting into Impressionism. And even some of this beautiful Mary Cassatt sort of stuff, you're still not seeing a lot of change. But once we start getting into Picasso, and also Klimt and Munch, you're starting to see a lot more changes, and we're seeing even constructions of all sorts of things by Picasso, and we're seeing simplistic Mondrians and things like that. Let's click back over to our other screen. But I just wanted to show you, when you flick through an art history book, you're not seeing lots of examples of artists showing a lot of self-expression, really, until the invention of the camera. All right. So let's click on back over here to here. Okay, so we talked about Bosch, and we talked about the Pre-Raphaelites that I really like, and then the invention of the camera. So this is when art starts to explode. So from slide to slide to slide, and even me going through my art history book, you're not seeing a lot of changes. But right after the invention of the camera, scientists started to experiment with it, like Muybridge. And then we see this example of Impressionism. This was Seurat that I mentioned, the invention, well, not the invention, but the scientific realization of how we see with rods and cones. And close up, we're seeing things that look a lot like digital images that we now see, right? And the understanding of the type of marks that light creates. And we see these beautiful pieces. So what we're starting to see, though, is artists having a new purpose. So instead of being a portrait artist documenting what people looked like or what battles happened or teaching through history or religion, we start seeing art exploring ideas, which we really don't see prior to the invention of the camera. So we see this in the entire era of modernism. Within modernism, there are so many isms that happened. We've got Impressionism, we have abstract expressionism. This is still Impressionism. And then we have Duchamp with these crazy ready-mades we talked about, and hanging up his urinal and saying, "This art is piss." And Nude Descending a Staircase. And this is the piece I did of him. And I'm going to do a whole video series of why I chose to do portraits of certain artists. And I'll talk more about that later. All right, and we talked about how Picasso was already able to render photorealistically pretty much at the age of 13 to 15. Crazy. All right, and moving on to much more exciting things. So we've already kind of talked about modernism and, you know, how many different things happened within modernism. And then we enter an age called postmodernism, and post meaning after, right? So whatever happened after modernism. And I love Dali breaking the function of the camera by documenting things that couldn't really happen, which is just so exciting. So artists asking new questions like, how can I create art with just line and color? Or how little can I do and still make my art pertinent or relevant and important? So here's my reductionist take on postmodernism. But I guess I'm going to take a slight variation before I... Well, we'll get back to this and talk about pop art. So people started to have televisions in their homes really in the 1950s. But one of the things that happened really right around the time of postmodernism, and this is just Tim Ellis's view, is that around 1970, we started to have imagery from the Vietnam War pumped into people's family rooms. So instead of sitting around and watching the Ed Sullivan Show and watching the Beatles perform or Howdy Doody or something like that, we started to see live footage from Vietnam. And, well, not exactly live, but reporters going in, filming what was in there, and people sitting around at the dinner table watching possibly their neighbor die in front of them. Now, I mean, that's a pretty extreme example, but this could happen. Literally, people who have family members at war are now watching the war. And I think what we start to see is a reaction to that hopelessness, that feeling of, is there anything I can do to help? And literally just watching terror and horror happen in their safety of their very own homes. So up until then, television was really fun family entertainment, even though it was kind of considered wild by those perspectives of parents at that time. When we started to have some of this, the carnage of war showing up into people's family rooms, I think that it changed the human mindset, and it kind of gave a sense of hopelessness. I'm going to click over here for a second. So regular Americans started to kind of have a nihilistic viewpoint of life. Things don't really matter. And art started to pick up on this, and we saw art change yet again. So what I'm saying in this reductionist art history that's simplified, and what that means is I'm taking something very complex and trying to boil it down to a few elements of change. I'm seeing certain inventions coming in, the printing press, the camera, and now television coming in and changing dramatically our culture. And art responds first, in my experience. Art kind of sets the tone. So let's see what we see here. Oh, anyway, we see pop art come on the scene, conceptual art, art about art, art about art history, performance art, which did exist in modernism, but there's a new element where the performance art tended to change culture. Moral relativism and subjectivity, which were the ideas that morality kind of changes depending on your situation, as opposed to an absolute morality. Let me click back over here. So this is kind of interesting. So I had mentioned the purpose of art prior to the camera. Now here's something that kind of breaks that. So here's just some illustrations in a magazine. This one is from, I think, 1953. No, this is 1956. This might be a retouched photo, but I'm pretty sure this is an illustration of this woman. And the other thing you see art starting to do is to create realities or situations that couldn't really happen. So illustrators, now this wasn't considered fine art. These were people that were more tradesmen, if you're an illustrator. And they would say, okay, I want a beautiful woman hugging her husband, smiling at the camera. And an artist would be like, gotcha, I'm gonna create that. So we did see photographs of things like that too, but in the 50s and 60s, we did start to see illustrations doing the same sorts of things. And I love a lot of these illustrations. By the way, an artist that takes a lot of heat for being a terrible artist as a fine artist is Norman Rockwell. I'll say a few shocking things. I love Norman Rockwell. So I don't look at him as a fine artist, but I think the way he captured the time period and his illustrations are so beautiful and simple and pure, but there's a complexity to them. So don't tell anyone, but I like him. But a lot of fine artists just say horrible things about Norman Rockwell. So here's just one other example. So here's an illustration. You see a lot of things in books and book jackets, but also like there's this depiction of war in this San Francisco battle, which I haven't read this. I don't know what this is about, but you just see a lot of illustrations. Even this ad is an illustration for a car. So we did see a lot of illustrations kick in. Now the camera could have done this, right? And as a matter of fact, we do see the camera doing that, even to today, where instead of having illustrations, we don't really see illustrations in advertising as much anymore. But like, for instance, this very cool imagery trying to sell some Banana Republic clothing is a beautiful kind of tableau with this woman and a dog and a man and a car. And I had one more to show you. Oh, you know what? I set it aside here with my 3x5 cards. Check these out. Also, really cool images that are actual people. So the camera is being used to create kind of a tableau, meaning a still image with a person inserted in it to create kind of a cool mood. So we do see that. And one of the things I'm going to be talking about a little bit later is that we start to see art doing this now with AI. Hey, AI, instead of asking an illustrator, give me a picture of a dog jumping over a rainbow in outer space, eating Cheez-Its for this new ad or something like that, or just for my new meme. And so we're starting to see some of the roles that artists had being taken over by machines. But I don't think it's as bleak as a lot of people do. So we'll talk about that. All right. So anyway, TV making a change. All right. Oh, and I did want to say one more thing. Well, let's talk about that in a minute. This is a great Oscar Wilde quote, basically that life imitates art. You hear this all the time. So We see this in style with clothing. We see it, that scientific research and discoveries, things like phones, weapons, cloning, atomic energy, impact our art. Design, what will the future look like? Culture, literally changed by art. Societal norms, marriage, work, career, social progress, minority rights, gender rights, legal decrees, equal rights that are changing the way our world is from art. We're going to start to see that in postmodernism. So modernism did some of this, but not as much as postmodernism did. So one of the things we see in early postmodernism is guys like Chuck Close going, oh yeah, you think the camera's real? Well, I'm going to get back to realism in a way where no one's ever seen. And I'm going to make things that are so realistic that it's going to blow people's minds. And I think it's great that his name is Close and he does close-ups. And he would literally paint, as you can see on this image on the left, in the colors that are broken down by color photography. Now remember, initially when the camera came on scene, it was black and white. So color was what the Impressionists used to do more than what the camera could do, or that was one of the first investigations that people started to do. But then we started to see a drift away from an attempt for that as color photography came on the scene. So Chuck Close is coming back and going, okay, camera, let's you and I go. What's interesting is Chuck Close ended up having an accident and his work became more abstract because he needed to literally change the way he painted. And I liked his abstract work even more than his non-abstract work. But I wanted to talk about pop art. So pop art is another thing that happened kind of between modernism and postmodernism. Most people would consider this modernism. So pop art started to also happen because of popular culture, hence the term pop art. So we see people like Andy Warhol, Klaus Oldenburg, and even bands like the Velvet Underground happening as a response to popular culture. So this was art having a lot to do with fame, consumerism, the concept of icon. We see art about Elvis, Marilyn Monroe, Andy Warhol himself becoming an iconic image. So the image of the artist becoming part of art. And this guy Klaus Oldenburg in the bottom right would make gigantic soft sculptures like of hamburgers. And apparently he opened up a shop in New York City where he would sell his soft sculptures, and you could walk in and get a hamburger to go that was a sculpture of a hamburger. I don't know if anyone bought this stuff, but I think that's just awesome. And this gigantic spoon that is also a bridge in the upper right hand corner. What? That's so great. And then I don't know how much you know about Andy Warhol, but he literally created an art factory called The Factory, where he hired people to make prints of his work. And also bands like the Velvet Underground would perform there and kind of became his little minions that he kind of controlled, and he'd be like, hey, we're going to do an album of your music. And so it became kind of this weird thing of artists pulling the strings of other artists to make new kinds of art. So pop art about popular culture, kind of, I think, is a big bridge between modernism and postmodernism, and one of the things that really brought this idea of culture, television, and pop culture into art. And so much of what we're seeing today really ties into this. All right, Cindy Sherman, again, I'm actually going to turn off my little camera so you can see this better. So Cindy Sherman takes photos only of herself. Now, I think she might have ventured out of this by now, but for years, this is all she did. But in every photo, she's not herself, she's someone else. So she would create a persona and then dress and act as this persona in a piece of art. I'm going to turn my camera back on now that you've seen that, and actually portray something or someone who she's not. She would be in a setting with lighting and makeup and hair done in such a way, like in the bottom right hand corner, she looks like a battered woman. In the bottom left, she looks like someone fleeing for her life. In the center, she's some sort of creepy mannequin, almost like a Barbie doll that's been destroyed. In the upper left, you've got someone that looks like a very wealthy woman with pearls kind of looking over her shoulder. There's just all these different personas. So I love Cindy Sherman is kind of taking what we saw Dali do with the camera and making all of her art about performance within a still, where she's creating a persona that's her, but that is not her. So it's taking photography and turning it on its head. postmodernism. Okay, so here is some other crazy stuff. We mentioned that performance art was already happening in modernism, but we see Marina Abramovic and Yoko Ono doing performances that literally involved the viewers. In this one on the left, Marina invited these lined up people to sit in front of her silently and just stare into her eyes for as long as they would like. And a lot of people broke into tears. It became this crazy, exciting human experiment where the interaction of silence with a stranger brought out some human emotion into people and touched on something new and exciting. So bringing the viewer into the performance. Now, this happened in happenings in the 1960s where you would drag a naked person through paint and paint, a big piece of canvas with a person's body, but mainly the people were watching. So there was some interaction with the artist and the model, but there wasn't a lot of the same sort of interaction we're seeing here. Yoko Ono, famed for destroying the Beatles, I actually think a lot of her music is brilliant. Anyway, all that to say, she invited the audience to come up with a pair of scissors and cut off parts of her clothing as she sat just docile and to see what would happen. Well, this ended up becoming a pretty revolutionary performance because she ended up almost naked at the end, even with some scratches from the scissors, as she invited people to interact with her however they like. Marina Abramovic also did something similar to this, where I just read something recently where she literally feared for her life during the performance as people were allowed to do whatever they wanted to her, and it got pretty scary. I haven't read the whole article, so I apologize if I'm misrepresenting it, but I just caught that like a few days ago. So one of the things that these sorts of performances did is they had to do with human interaction, and a lot of them were with women. And one of the things that caused indirectly, so I don't want you to think these performances happened and then the world changed, but we started to see the world changing and waking up to, why would a woman have her clothes cut off given the opportunity? Well, it made people go, what's wrong with people that they would do that to someone, or that they would harm someone given the opportunity? And it started to make people think about women's rights. We started to have things like female astronauts, female vice presidents, or women running for president and actually almost winning. So we started to see a change in culture. Now, some of these changes are just happening now, but I point back to performances like Cut, where women were doing things to raise awareness to what's wrong with our world, what's wrong with people, what's wrong with our perception of gender. And you'll see this more. Okay, Yayoi Kusama. Yayoi Kusama is an incredible artist. She, last time I checked, was the richest, most successful female artist who is alive. I'm pretty sure she is in her 80s now. And Yayoi, the top center image, by the way, is not her. It's someone in her infinity room, which is in the Broad Museum, where I'm taking some students this week. I'm excited. But she literally sees spots before her eyes. She has some mental illness that makes it impossible for her to function 100% on her own. So at a young age, she started painting the spots that she sees in front of her eyes on things, on objects, on horses, on people. And what's so exciting about Yayoi Kusama is A, she's a Japanese woman. 2, she has mental illness. And 3, she is incredibly successful, not hiding her mental illness, but using it as a main component of her art. Notice there's polka dots and patterns on everything. And so she's become iconic as kind of a spokesperson without speaking about mental illness, but saying, I have mental illness, literally lives in a facility where people take care of her to help her through her day, and yet she is the most successful monetarily living female artist. I just think that's so awesome. And I love her work. I mean, she is a piece of work. Like Andy Warhol, look at her. I mean, she is iconic in as a piece of art. The photos that have been taken of her in posing with her art are, I think, as great as her art. All right, let's go on to another slide. But just what's the big point? The big point is we're seeing culture shifted, the perception that someone with mental illness does not have to be an outcast, locked up and set aside. They can be someone who inspires us and who changes art. Oh, okay, Sandy Skoglund, not as famous as some of the other artists I've included, but I think she's done some pretty important things artistically. And I'm going to get my camera off of here so you can see this piece better. So like some of the other artists I've talked about, like Dali and not unlike Cindy Sherman, she puts real people in situations, but she also creates environments for these people to exist within. So some of the pieces, like the one on the left, are mannequins, and these mannequins are, some of them are literally covered with cheese curls, so is the room itself, and then real people are put inside of this environment. But the final piece isn't the environment, it's the photograph of the environment. So once again, the photo is documenting something that couldn't really happen. So it's a surreal photo, as if that could happen. But we saw Dali doing that early on, but this person has taken it to a new level, hence it becomes postmodernism. So it's a reaction to modernism. And I love the one on the right as well with the kids with the fish. And so is Sandy a sculptor? Yes, she does sculpture. Does she make installation art where she goes into a space and creates installations? Yes. Is she a photographer? Yes, and almost you could say she's a performance artist because she's got people performing within this, kind of creating a tableau like we talked about before. But then her final piece is a photograph of something that's surreal. So once again, we see art kind of breaking what the camera was initially intended to do. Okay, Jeff Koons, Top Secret. I don't like Jeff Koons's work. I'm very underwhelmed by it. But once again, we see kind of pop culture. We see this as pop art. Remember, Andy Warhol was taking things from everyday life and taking them and going, hey, Campbell's soup, you hear the commercials all the time. Now think of it as art if I stack up the Campbell's soup. Let's look at instructional cha-cha-cha dance steps, and I'll print them out and hang them on the wall, and we're going to look at them as a piece of art. So he would take everyday objects from pop culture or just life and make us think about them. So Jeff Koons is doing that with people like Michael Jackson, and I'm pretty sure his monkey is named Bubbles at the top, and making a huge ceramic sculpture of Michael and Bubbles. Jeff, like many of the postmodern artists, does not make his own work exclusively. He has, like Andy Warhol, a team of people producing his work for him. So it's not that he never touches or has anything to do with his work, but he's more of a director telling other people, hey, make me a Michael Jackson ceramic sculpture looking like kind of a Rococo style and make it huge. Or remake Duchamp's bottle drying rack, but make it out of a more modern material, and we're going to put one of my balloons in the top. So I'm going to make art about remember within modernism, Duchamp made these ready-mades. So Koons is going, I'm going to take your ready-made and I'm going to make a copy of it, and then I'm going to put my own twist on it. So it's art about art history. So one of the things we see in postmodernism is art about art history. Remember, this happened because of the change in the viewpoint of culture of nihilism. The concept that there really isn't an absolute truth, kind of I'm sorry, I thought that I was changing my camera and I got to get onto my other screen. 1 second. Okay, I was able to get that back on. I was trying to think of a word. Not postmodern, moral relativism, the idea that there's not always a right and wrong. And these things kind of made artists go, okay, what should I be making art about? So art became made about art history. Remember Duchamp's urinal? Well, Jeff Koons has a gold toilet. And so it's art about art, but instead of saying this art is crap, it's taking crap and making it gold. And so it's taking a piece of art and making it precious, or taking a balloon animal, which is throwaway art that someone literally would make, a balloon animal. I couldn't make a great balloon animal, giraffe or dog or whatever that's supposed to be, and then making it monumental in size, which means making a huge sculpture and then making it all shiny and metal. So Jeff Koons making art about art, not really making his own art. It's kind of like we saw Andy Warhol in the factory. Okay, Damien Hirst. Also, I'm not a huge fan of Damien Hirst. One of the things Damien Hirst does is he kills a lot of things for his art. And I have not heard Damien say this, but this is my take on what I think Damien Hirst is doing, even though I don't think Damien Hirst realizes it. Okay, these are endangered butterfly wings behind him, made into kind of a stained glass window looking thing. So we see a lot of animal death to make his art. These are some of these stained glass window looking butterfly wings. This is a real shark that's been killed and stuck in a tank of formaldehyde for Damien Hirst's art. This is a real human skull spitting out plastic. These are real cows that have been cut in half and thrown in formaldehyde. Now, I'm sorry if this is upsetting. It's upsetting to most people, and I think there's a reason for it. These are real human skulls with diamonds encrusted on them. So, for one thing, Damien Hirst knows how to make a buck. For a while, I think Jeff Koons and he kind of go back and forth on who is the richest living artist. But Damien Hirst, for this skull exhibit, had people lining up down the street buying tickets to come in and see the skull. You're in the daylight. By the time you get in to see the skull, they only ushered in a few people into this very dark room at a time. Bright lights on the skull, diamonds, dark room. Your eyes are adjusting. And by the time you start to see it, your time's up and you have to leave. And so people would literally go back and get at the beginning of the line again to see the skull. And he sold plenty of tickets to do this, not to mention selling the art itself. And I actually don't know if these sold. And let me just click ahead and see if that's my last Damien Hirst image. So what's going on here? Well, for one thing, we're seeing humans and animals. Now, this is not the first person to do this. Kienholz did this in Modernism, where he would use hospital rags that were dirty and things like that in art. And we've seen people like Dwayne Hansen making incredibly realistic human form. But one of the things I think we see, and I talked about this in Postmodernism, we saw art that changes the culture. And so why is this upsetting to look at? Well, it's upsetting to look at something like this because you go, well, that is senseless murder. This guy is killing or promoting the death of animals, whether he's personally killing them or not. He didn't make one of these sculptures. He's made hundreds, if not thousands of these. They're all over the place. For one thing, it's a lot of formaldehyde. Another thing, they're huge, and they're all requiring the death of an animal or a person. So he's not killing people. But for this, what's the message? And I don't know if he would agree with me, but I think the message is humans are creating all kinds of plastic waste. What is that waste doing? Eventually, it's destroying our oceans. That's the main place we dump it. It's destroying our planet, and it's causing our own death. So why is it a skull? Because it symbolizes human death. Who's causing the human death? We are. Who's causing animal death? We're not eating a lot of sharks, although people do kill sharks for different reasons. But we are killing animals in the ocean, which is where most life is on this planet, by the way, by dumping most of our garbage in it. We know that this is a huge problem. I don't think Damien Hirst is really an environmental activist, but I think, what's the message? Hey, if this shocks you, maybe you shouldn't be killing animals senselessly. If you're upset that all the butterflies are dying from my art, maybe you shouldn't be killing the bees and the butterflies with all of the pollution we're creating and ripping down all the trees which they need to roost and reproduce. So it's art with a message, whether or not it's intentional, about death upsets us and it makes us look back at ourselves. So all of his work, in my viewpoint, is a mirror at ourselves and makes us go, maybe we should do things differently. And a lot of postmodernism does that. We've looked at a little bit already. Let's look at some more. Okay, if we click ahead to Shepard Fairey. Shepard Fairey, LA artist. I'm pretty sure I ran into Shepard Fairey when I was making band flyers at Hollywood and La Brea Kinko's. I think it's Hollywood and La Brea. It might be Sunset. Back in the 80s, early 90s. And this guy was making huge Xeroxes. And I remember going, wow, those are some really cool Xeroxes. I didn't even know you could make them that big here. He's like, oh, yeah, they have special machines. And we chatted up a little bit. In hindsight, I had no idea who Shepard Fairey was at the time. Now that I know, I think it was him. So anyway, all that to say, back in the day, you would make your band flyers at Kinko's. Cool history lesson. Anyway, so we have a guy. I don't know if you've seen Exit Through the Gift Shop. Go watch it right now. I'll try to link to it if you have not. It's a great film to make you go, what about art matters? But what Shepard Fairey did, he's kind of a skate punk who was making stickers, and he started making stickers of Andre the Giant on the upper right hand corner here that said obey. Initially they looked like his face. They kind of morphed into this sticker in the upper right hand corner that kind of looks like a devil version of Andre the Giant, and then eventually it just became the word obey, that you might even own a piece of obey clothing and be like, I don't know why it says obey. Well, that was his whole thing. He started putting stickers everywhere, all over Los Angeles, all over other countries. There was one on the Berlin Wall, and his goal was to just get the word obey everywhere. It was kind of a social experiment, and it was also just kind of his punk rock upbringing of flyer art, and it was also his way of just kind of getting out there and being part of the street art culture. So what ended up happening is people started to adopt this word obey into clothing, into posters, and so many people were like, what is it about? That when it did start to show up on clothing and things, it became a brand. It became his brand. And so by illegally advertising his brand, by sticking it on huge billboards with big posters and things like that, he actually used advertising to create fame for himself, and he became this famous artist. The thing that made him even more famous than Obey, though, is his Obama Hope street art. This was a piece of art he put up in the upper left-hand corner. He was for Obama, and he was like, you know what? I want to help this guy get elected. He made this iconic image of Obama, wrote Hope next to it. The Obama campaign saw it and was like, that's pretty great. And they adopted it for part of their campaign. And so we see a street artist actually helping one of the first Black president in the United States become elected from an illegal form of street art. Now it became legal as they started to make, legitimate posters that they posted. But his initial piece was an illegal piece of street art. So we see street art, which was considered graffiti and a crime and kind of the lowest form of art, being elevated to actually getting a president elected, and also showing up in pretty cool high fashion elements with the whole Obey thing, to where today Shepard Fairey is making pieces about social justice all over the place and is a celebrated Los Angeles artist and now an internationally famous artist. So postmodernism, art, changing the world, changing the culture, mainly for good. And you can see a bunch of things for sale here with the Obey, and you can see some of the Obey posters. Whenever I see one, I just get a big smile on my face because it's just such a punk rock approach to art. Oh my gosh. Okay, Banksy. You probably know about Banksy. I'll make my camera go away for a minute. Banksy, apparently his identity was discovered recently. I don't know if that's true. It's hard to know what's true with this guy, but he's an anonymous artist that would make art. He would make his sales secretly through other dealers, but he initially was just a graffiti artist, and his pieces were all either funny or had political and funny messages. Like in the bottom right-hand corner, we see someone who would be throwing a Molotov cocktail, throwing flowers. So flowers, hey, here's some beautiful flowers for you. Not something you'd normally throw when you're angry. So it's kind of a make love, not war sort of a message. In the upper right-hand corner here, Banksy's work started to be sold by other people. So he kind of did a performance piece where he showed up, and I think this was either London or New York City. I think it was New York City. He set up a bunch of his own work. This is actually him, but it looked like knockoff Banksy work. Notice it says $60 spray art. So he's selling his work, Banksy, whose pieces are at this point were already probably in the $10,000 to $100,000 range. Now we're in the millions for Banksy's. Selling his art on the street, posing as someone who would be ripping Banksy off, but it's him. So it's kind of a performance piece or kind of a publicity stunt. So if you were smart enough to go, I wonder if that's really him, I'm going to get a $60 Banksy and just see what happens, well, then you bought a real Banksy that day. Pretty cool. He also made a lot of art about street art and about should street art be legal, should street art be oppressed. And in the upper left-hand corner here, when Sotheby's auctioned off one of his pieces, he had built in a remote control to make the piece literally shred itself on TV during the auction right after it sold. So somebody buys a Banksy. I don't remember how much this sold for, but it was a lot. And then it immediately starts to destroy itself. Apparently it malfunctioned. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but halfway through it stopped shredding it. And so because the whole world was watching this, it became a meme, it became front page news, and the piece became even more valuable. And here his whole message was, you sell my art without it being me selling my art, well, then I'm going to destroy it. But it ended up becoming even more valuable. So Banksy, kind of tongue-in-cheek, almost kind of like Monty Python-esque British artist, making politically humorous art, also sometimes very serious art, causing political change. Okay, Keith Haring. We don't look at Keith Haring and go, this is a guy that changed the world, but he did. So you may or may not know Keith Haring's work. This is him that I'm circling right here with my mouse. He's wearing a piece of his own work. He made lots of pieces, like in the bottom left here. It was initially graffiti art and very, very bright, happy, colorful dancing figures. And what his art ended up doing is becoming based on things that he felt were important things that needed to change. Keith was a gay man working mainly at the time during the AIDS epidemic, and started making pieces about safe sex, pieces about homosexuality, about, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner here, this isn't just a piece about people being happy and dancing, it's the gender symbols being the same and linked. Well, when do genders get linked with circles? They get linked with circles when they get married, right? So it's a piece about gay marriage, and it's just showing, hey man, we're just happy, we're just in love, we're just dancing. What's the problem here? He made some very serious pieces too. In the upper left-hand corner, this is a piece about freeing South Africa. And right under the name Keith Haring here, I have an image of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was an imprisoned South African man at a time during apartheid. If you're not familiar with what apartheid was, it was similar to the American slavery era, except it technically wasn't called slavery. Blacks were considered lesser citizens and kept completely separate, and they had to live in something called shanty towns, which you're looking at right next to Nelson Mandela here in these shacks that are falling down. And crazy thing. Now, this isn't just because of Keith Haring. There were a lot of other artists, a lot of other political pressures on South Africa to change. But when I was growing up in the 80s, we were like, South Africa's never going to change. And what happened is Nelson Mandela was like, I am not going to live like this. So he started to stand up and speak out against the South African government. He was very quickly imprisoned and apparently tortured while he was in prison for a huge part of his life. He continued to do political activism from prison and work towards the freeing of South Africa. So one of the things that our friend Keith Haring did is he made a piece about it. He brought a lot of attention to it. A lot of people didn't know this was happening. So he made this piece about the large black figure crushing the small white figure. Why a large black figure? Because the blacks are the main population in South Africa. The whites were Dutch settlers that had taken over the country and were oppressing the blacks. So the image is, okay, the leash around the large black figure that the white man thinks is controlling doesn't have to control him, because the black man is bigger and stronger than the white man in South Africa because of number. And so eventually we did see a lot of pressure happen, and South Africa had its first free election, and the blacks were allowed to vote, and they voted in Nelson Mandela goes from being prisoner to being president of South Africa, released, and changes the entire country. So not single-handedly because of Keith Haring, but we saw art that changed culture. Equal rights because of gender or homosexual or sexual identity. We see also oppression changing in many cultures because of this cute little happy art that Keith Haring would make. It's also, like I said, there were a ton of other things affecting this, but art did play a part in it. All right, let's click on, we're almost out of this. So there's so much more art that's happening in postmodernism. And one of the things that's happening right now that everybody's freaking out about is AI and art. Because you can just ask your AI to make you anything you want. Now, I included some funny images here because these cats are kind of human and they're wearing human things. And then on the right, you know, the big thing with AI art is they add too many fingers or they morph things together that shouldn't be. But these are pieces on the right that are intended to do that are kind of cool. So what is... A lot of artists feel like AI is going to destroy art as we know it. And what I look at, as I look at the art history that we've looked at so far, and I'm going to go to this bigger screen, is that every time a huge invention comes in, the camera, which was thought it was going to destroy art. Before that, the printing press. I don't know if people felt like it was going to destroy art, but it definitely did change art, right? We saw the camera change art. We saw the television change art. And now we're seeing AI come in. So I'm not fearful because I go, okay, artists can use these new tools in ways like a paintbrush, to a digital tablet, to a digital pencil, to a camcorder, whatever it is that people invent. Artists can use them to do amazing things. I don't know exactly where we're going to go with AI art, but I am not looking at it like the doom monster coming on to destroy us all. I look at it as yet another tool that could be used by artists in great ways. So once again, the question to ask is, as an artist, what can I do that AI can't do? Or how can I use this as a tool to achieve things that I could not achieve before? What new thing is going to happen? Keep your eyes open. And if you're an artist watching this right now, maybe experiment, see what you can do. If you're anti-AI, maybe what we're going to see is that everything becomes so pristine and so perfect and so photorealistic that we're going to see a return to abstract expressionism, or we're going to see a return to, incredibly expressive brushwork, or maybe we're going to see a return to pointillism. Who knows? But I think it's exciting when new things happen. So don't be afraid. Anyway, huge simplification. I'm sorry if I've made any mistakes in this presentation or bored you, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Once again, I'm Tim Ellis. All my social media is Timellisart. Please like and subscribe and share if you like this. I'd love to hear your comments. And I do have beginning to advanced drawing classes on my website. If you'd like to take a look at those, learn how to draw realistically super fast, and look at what some of my students have done. All right, over and out. Thanks for tuning in.